Hello, everyone. This is Erin Korselman, the founder of HonestlyADHD.com and the Honestly ADHD Parenting Academy. This is our third video in a series I'm doing for about the next, 8 weeks about the 7 principles for parenting kids with ADHD. And our first principle that we talked about a couple of videos back was empathy, practicing empathy with an eye toward empowering our kids. And we have 3 steps to doing that. The first one we talked about last video, which was decreasing the assumptions we make about our children, what's going on in their minds. The next one we're going to talk about today, which is increasing the acceptance that we have of our children, their capabilities, and where they're at. And I'm going to talk to you about why that's important and what that means. And next time we're going to be talking about making sure you are connecting before correcting with your children and why that is important. And so those are the 3 steps to empathy toward and power, with having empathy for your children with an eye toward empowerment. All right, so what we're going to talk about today is increasing acceptance in our kids, or for our kids, where they're at and what they're doing, and what the heck does all of that mean? So how many of you find yourself thinking, you're 9 years old, you should be able to tie your shoes, or you're 12 years old, you should be able to clean your room without any oversight? Those kinds of things. How many of you are saying the word should be able to a lot? I know I used to do that all the time, and sometimes I still catch myself doing that. But what I need to remind all parents of is a few things. But the first thing is that we need to accept our children and where they are at. Now, why? Why do we have to accept our children where they're at? Well, let me take you back to when your kids were learning to walk. Hi, Dawn. Nice to see you on here. Let me take you back to when your children were learning to walk, okay? When your child was learning to walk, whether they walked at 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 14 months, you understood that your child was going through a developmental phase, that they were going to learn to sit, and then they were going to learn to crawl, and then they were going to learn to walk. And no matter where they were in that process, you trusted that the process was going to happen, and you supported your child where they needed to be, where they were. If your child was still kind of on tummy time and wasn't yet sitting, you were meeting them there and learning how to sit, and then teaching them to crawl, and then teaching them to walk. If you had 2 10-months-old and one was walking and one was barely even sitting, you didn't look at the one that was barely sitting and say, you really should be walking. I'm not going to help you anymore. It's going to be tough love from here on out. You should be walking, so I'm just going to make you walk without the support that you need. No. With babies, we all understand that we have to meet them where they're at. No matter where they are, we're going to hold them with the fingers. We're going to let them hold their fingers, let them toddle around. We're going to support them exactly where they are. Why do we do that? So that we don't teach beyond their capability. Because if we teach beyond their capability, what they're ready for, not only will they not learn what we ultimately want them to learn, but they'll stop learning where they are too. So let's take an example of math class. Let's say your child is in 3rd grade math, and your teacher decides that they should be learning 5th grade math. And she just walks in and says, hey, today we're going to start learning 5th grade math. And your child says, wait a minute, I'm only in 3rd grade math. Not only is your child not going to learn 5th grade math, but they're also not going to learn 3rd grade math. So they're done learning. They're going to give up. They're going to be hopeless. They're going to feel helpless. They're going to start adopting some really bad behavior. And they're going to start adopting some ways to cope with that very negatively, okay? That's what happens when we don't accept our children's place, their capabilities, their current capabilities. That's what happens when we don't accept those current capabilities and we force them beyond their years. Now, let's just take impulse control, ADHD and impulse control, for example. Impulse control is a skill, right? It's a skill. And if we expect them to have a skill beyond their capability, so if we expect them to be able to manage their impulses beyond what they're able to, not only will they not learn how to do that, but they won't learn how to manage it at the level that they are, if that makes sense. right? So we don't want to teach beyond your child's capabilities. So we need to accept where they're at. We need to learn where we need to start teaching them so that we can empower them to success, okay? So the way that I'm going to teach you one major trick, and some of you may have already heard this. I have a longer blog post on it at the blog, but the point that I'm going to drive home today is all about something called executive age. And this isn't something I made up. It's something Dr. Russell Barkley made up. You can look him up online. He's awesome. I have a book of his on my favorites page. Take a look at his stuff. But he has coined this the executive age. And what it is that your child's executive age, their ability to manage impulses, manage their emotions, their working memory, their processing speed, all of that is going to be 2/3 of their biological age. So if you have a 6-year-old, his or her executive age is at 4. If you have a 12-year-old, his or her executive age is at, let's do the math, 8. If you have a 15-year-old, executive age is 10. Now, if you look at that over time, you'll see that that gap widens as they age. And so sometimes this feeling of like, you should be able to stay home alone and you're not anywhere near close to that yet. That begins to widen, that gap begins to widen over time, right? So executive age is super important for you to know, because the question you need to ask yourself is, well, the first thing you need to do is think, I'm going to accept my child for where he or she likely is, where he or she likely can perform right now. So let's take cleaning your room for an example. I'm going to accept that my child may not have all the skills needed to clean his or her room. My child is 12, so I am going to support my child as though I would if she were still 8. Okay, so if she were 8, what would I do to support my child? What kind of supervision would I give? What type of cues for what to do first, second, and third? What type of other help would I, what allotted amount of time would I give? What sort of incentives would I give or consequences would I give? What sort of support would I give my child if she were still 8? And that's where you start, okay? That's where you start. Doesn't mean that's where you stay. It's where you start. You have to find where your child can. And once you figure out where your child can, then you begin to push them into more discomfort to help teach them how to do things on their own and more autonomously. But you have to first discover where they are. So executive age, figure out your child's executive age, support them right there. So homework is another great example, right? My child is 15. He should be able to sit down and do all of his homework by himself, right? I want you to think, my child may not have all of the skills and capabilities to do homework all by himself like I would have expected a 15-year-old to do. How would I support my child if this child were 10? What kind of expectations, what kind of supervision, what kind of tools would I provide this child if he were 10? Okay, that's where you're always going to start. So accepting your children right where they're at, finding out where they can with the intention of pushing them further. Super, super important, not only so that they learn the end game. I mean, they need to learn what you ultimately want them to learn, but they also need to learn along the way, because otherwise, I promise you, they will get so frustrated, they will give up, they will become hopeless, and they're going to adopt some really bad habits in trying to cope with that feeling of never being able to be good enough. All right. And those habits look like defiance, and they look like anger, and they look like work avoidance and disrespect. They look like all sorts of things, laziness, all of that. But the key is accepting them for where they are and moving forward. All right. So next time we are going to talk about connecting before correcting, and then we'll move on past principle number 1 into principle number 2. So I will see you on Thursday. Bye-bye.